Hello, my name is Ben Christopherson. We're here at the University of West London in Ealing, and we are going to start off by using some puff pastry and making a Gâteau Pithivier. So what you're going to need is a piece of well-rested puff pastry, and you're going to roll it out into a nice long sheet. You're going to cut out 2 discs, about 2 or 3 millimeters thickness, and then you're going to put them onto a tray and you're going to chill them down so they're nice and cold. And then you will make your almond filling, your frangipane, you'll pipe it in, you'll build the pithivier, and then you'll bake it and glaze it. Right, so the first thing we're going to do is roll out the puff pastry. So you'll need a little bit of flour on the bench, and just start off by gently pressing it out. What you want to try and do is use just enough flour to stop the dough sticking to the rolling pin, but not enough to add too much more starch to the recipe to dry it out. So what I'm doing is just softening the dough nice and gently. It's nice to do it nice and gently because you keep more of the layers intact. If you go very heavy-handed on it, you'll start to break the layers of lamination, and you won't get such a nice equal rise. And what I do is sort of utilise as much of the flour I've got on my table as possible, instead of keeping adding it, which is what you see people do sometimes. So you want to try and avoid that. I've also rolled the pastry exactly the width of my rolling pin, which is also the similar width to the tray as well. So it all makes it fit together nice and easily. You can see the dough as well springing back as I'm working with it, because as you stretch the gluten out, it needs time to relax to go back to its original form. That's why the resting is really important in this case. So the more you allow the dough to relax a little bit when you're rolling it, the better it's going to be for the resting period. So just allow that to relax a little bit, and that's about 2 to 3 mils thick. That's more or less the thickness that you want for the pithivier. You don't want to be tempted to have it too thick because it really will puff up, and if it's too thick, it'll puff up and it will go out of shape. So best to let that relax in the fridge, so you can transfer that to a tray and then let it relax, and then take it out of the fridge. Once it's relaxed, and then you can cut your 2 discs out. All right, great. So that's been resting in the fridge for minimum half an hour, just to chill it down, to stop the pastry going out of shape too much. So a little bit more flour on your marble slab. We use a marble slab because it keeps the temperature down as much as possible. So that's one of the benefits. And the other one is that it's really nice and flat. You'll find a lot that the metal benches that you work on have always got uneven surfaces, so using marble is considerably better in pastry in general. We use it, for chocolate and sugar work as well, but rolling pastry particularly useful. All right, great. So you've got your chilled rolled out dough to the right thickness. You use a 20 centimeter ring for an 8-portion pithivier, and what you're going to do is you're going to have one which is very, very slightly bigger than the other one, so the base will be slightly smaller than the lid. And what you're going to do is be nice and careful when you do this. I use a scalpel because when you cut the dough, if you use a knife and you cut the knife through the dough, as you do that, you'll be squeezing all the laminations together, and when it puffs, it won't necessarily puff as equally as you want it to. So if you use a scalpel, really nice and sharp, and you're very, very careful and you cut it and it's very, very sharp, you will keep all those laminations separate from each other, which will make it much, much better for the actual puffing of the dough. So that one I cut inside the ring, and this one I'm just going to cut slightly outside the ring, going slightly wider on the outside to make sure it's slightly bigger. Using the same theory of making sure you get a really nice cut as well. The cleaner the better. Then what you can do with these two pieces, transfer them back onto a tray and then just chill them right down. And then your remaining piece of dough, will keep this piece here for making the next item, or you can use all of the offcuts, the second piece of dough, for all manner of different things like different tarts or pies or cheese straws or anything like that. Essentially the key thing to remember is with laminated doughs is that you continue to use them as long as possible, because they're obviously high value products made from lots of butter. And one of the ways we always keep them is you don't roll it into a ball. What you want to do is you want to keep the laminations alive by folding it back across on itself. So essentially you're just putting more folds in, and you can wrap it up, put it in the other one, and it can be used into another product. So we've just let the puff pastry bases chill in the fridge for a minimum of half an hour, and that really relaxes the dough so that it's not going to shrink when it's cooking, which is the key part. And you can see I've got one of the discs, so the base, and the lid, which is slightly larger. So what I've done with the lid is, to make it slightly larger, I've just very, very gently given it an additional roll just to make it slightly thinner and slightly larger. And the reason for that is the lid is going to go over the top of the frangipan, so it needs a bit of extra length, and also it's really good if it's a little bit thinner as well, because that puff pastry will really puff up and it will take up a lot of space on the actual product. So you don't want it getting enormous, because it will go out of shape and there'll be a big air gap in it, and it's not quite how you want it. So you've got two pieces. You've got the base, slightly thicker, and then you've got the lid, which is slightly thinner and slightly larger. Another tip that I always use when I'm making Pithivier is to have a small cake card, because when you start moving it around, you don't want to be trying to pick it up. If you have a cake card and you can just slide it underneath and you can move it around nice and easily. So that's a handy thing to have just on the side. Okay, so what I've done is prepared some frangipan, so some almond cream, and I'm just going to start to put the Pithivier together. So what I'm going to do is pipe the almond cream into the centre, then I'm going to glaze the outside, and then the lid's going to go on top. But before I do that, one of the parts to it that gives it a little bit more flavour, a little bit more sweetness as well, is apricot jam. So it's just a regular basic apricot jam that I've just softened a little bit so it's easier to spread on. So I put on about 15 grams, about a large dessert spoon. Don't be tempted to put more on and think it's going to have more flavour and more texture. All that will happen is if you've got too much on there, eventually it will seep out of the sides and it will run down the side of the Pithivier. And because obviously the high sugar content in jam, it will leave a large dark burnt mark running down the side of the Pithivier, which will get larger and larger as it rises up. So it's not quite what you want at all. So really, really nice thin layer of jam. Leave a good 3 centimetre gap on the outside. Set your frangipan, almond cream. Try and calculate as best you can the centre. By eye, you'll be able to do it relatively accurately. And then pipe on the frangipan. Don't worry if you don't get it absolutely spot on accurate. You can always come round with a couple of sort of correcting marks, like that bit there might need a little bit more. If you've missed a bit, don't worry, you can just come round and do it. It doesn't have to be 100% neat. It's helpful if it is, if it's accurate, but it's not absolutely essential. Take a little bit of egg yolk, Less is more. Don't splash it on for exactly the same reason as the jam. If you put lots and lots on, it will come out around the sides, and it will leave an egg mark burning down the side, and also it will stick the laminations together, and again you'll get a slightly wonky Pithivier. So really that's just on there to bind the two pieces together. Then what you're going to do is you're going to place the lid on top, and the way you're going to do that is, the best way is to roll it onto a rolling pin and then roll it across. So take your pin, roll it on, find the edge, and then put a little bit of pressure on and roll it over the top. And then what you have to do is try and make that gap, that skirt if you like, not have an air bubble. So what I'm doing is I'm just picking it up and pushing it back in slightly. This is why we make this top one larger. So pick it up, push it back in, and I do press it down a little bit, but I'm quite gentle. Don't worry if the two sizes are not exact. What we'll do is we'll trim that in a minute. So just go round, get the dough to fit nicely, and then I just want to go around with my fingers and just give it a little press, and that does really help bond the two pieces together and make sure they don't split open when it's cooking. All right, and that now we're going to put it in the blast chiller, get it really, really nice and cold, relax the dough as much as possible, and then we'll trim the excess pastry off the side, and then we'll put the classic shape on. We'll trim that, egg wash it, put the marks on top, and then bake it in a nice hot oven around 210. It does very much depend on your oven. If you've got a particularly fierce convection oven, you really want to have a look at the temperature, maybe turn it down to sort of 190, 200. And if you're using a traditional deck oven, sort of around 210 to 220. But it does depend on you. You know your oven better than anyone. So make sure when you put it in, have a look after 10 minutes, judge it. It might need a bit of a turnaround. It's really one of those things where you are doing quite a lot of cooking. All right, so what I've done is I've just chilled the Pithivier down in the blast chiller just to get it nice and cold, just to give me an opportunity to just cut that piece of dough so it fits on the base size. If you can cut the dough so that you don't have to do this, so that you get the two sizes exactly the same, that's preferable. But if you find that this dough is a different size, then it's fine, just so long as you chill the dough down and you use a really sharp knife and just cut that excess dough off. Like that. And then you've got your Pithivier shape cut nicely. So now what you can do is you can cut the scalloped edges, and you can do it freehand, so you'll be cutting sort of moon-shaped scalloped edges all the way around. But what I do is I've sacrificed a plastic cutter that I wasn't really using very much, so that I've got that nice half moon shape, so that it's much easier for me. I'm also using underneath here that cake card. If you just put the pastry on the marble, it will stick to the marble really quickly, and this way I don't have to use any flour or anything anymore. So my sharp knife again, and what I'm going to do is just go around and I'm just going to mark off those scalloped edges that I want. Sometimes it doesn't fit exactly, but that's okay. I can just cut round, get a good idea of where I'm going with the scalloped edges. So now what you've got to do is you've got to cut those round scallop shapes all the way around, and it's very tempting when you're doing this to cut at an angle, so a 45-degree angle, because that's easier on your hands. What you want to do is you want to cut as much as you can at 90 degrees. So when I say that, what I mean is to cut absolutely straight down like that as much as possible, and then you go back round there and your knife is as flat as possible. This pastry is really nice and cool. It's just at the right temperature for cutting. And you can see my knife cuts through it nice and easy, and the dough is nice, easy to handle. If it gets a bit warm when I'm doing this, I'll just put it back in the blast freezer, get it as cool as possible. The temptation is at this stage is to not move the dough around, and what will happen is your wrist will go over, the knife will go over, you'll be at a funny angle, and all that means is that you lose the definition of that scalloped edge, and you don't see the lamination as it cooks. And that's really what you're trying to show off in this product, is that really nice laminated dough that puffs up. And you can see all those layers, all the work that's gone into making that dough. All right, so that's more or less right. There might be a couple of bits just to take off, but in general, that's pretty much where we want to be. And then having that cake card underneath means you can transfer it around as nice and easily. Okay, so once that's done, those bits can be kept again, making into cheese straws, or goes in a general laminated dough collection. So now I can move this final product, take the base off, put it on, and get it ready for the next bit, where you're going to score the top using egg wash, and you are going to then put sun rays on essentially all the way around. At this point you want to try and be as accurate as possible to find the center. So what I do is I measure the raised part in the middle, so as much as possible. So that's 15, so it's about 7.5, so it's approximately there. And what I'm going to do now is just go across that way. Have a look how far across I am. So there's 7.5. So that section there is more or less the center, which is really important because you're now going to put some rays on. And you want to get it spot on in the middle so that the rays on this side are not shorter than the ones on that side. So next bit to do is you're going to egg wash. And again, start off with less is more. So I've really just got a tiny bit of egg wash on there. And I'm going to do the top part first, nice and quickly. Little bit more egg yolk, and then I'm really carefully I'm going to go and do all of these elements here. Again, because I really don't want the egg wash to spill down over the puff, because it will burn on the outside of the product, and it will stop the laminations rising up nice and equally. And it's these little bits like this, the bits where you've really, take a little bit of time in your work and a little bit of precision, that make a big difference in the final product. There's a lot of work that goes into puff pastry, all the lamination and the chilling and the folding and all the work and time that goes into it, and obviously the money as well. The cost of butter is so high that you really, really want to take as much care as you can over it, and show off the work that's been put into it. Obviously you want to be very careful that you don't miss any spots, because they really do stand out. So that's your first layer of glaze, and you can let that dry for 1 or 2 minutes. I mean, as you're doing it really is sufficient, and then go on with another layer, so your second layer. So that's your base coat, if you like. So go on with your second layer, so that you're going to end up with a really nice glaze on your product. And it's important to have a reasonably good layer of glaze on here, good layer of egg wash on here, because when you draw those lines on, you want the lines to go through to the pastry so that you can see it when it cooks. So just go again on those scalloped edges. Make sure it's all good. Okay, and then this part here is the part where you're going to put the rays onto the dish, onto the Pithivier. So you're essentially going to draw lines onto the dish that go through the glaze and then expose the top of the pastry. So when the product cooks, you'll have really nice golden glaze from the egg wash, and then you'll have a white line from the pastry. And instead of drawing a straight line, you're going to draw a line that curves round. And what I choose to do generally is I take a knife which is not extremely sharp, and if I've got a knife, only a knife which is very sharp, I'll actually turn the knife over and use the blunt side of the knife. This knife is not particularly sharp, it's actually quite perfect for doing this, so I'm quite happy to do it. I don't want to use a super sharp knife because I'll cut through the dough, and obviously as the dough rises up it'll actually split. So you want to go quite carefully, and you want to just put a line straight on. If you're not comfortable doing it with the blade side, just turn the knife over. And the best way, in my experience, that I learned to do this was, you're going to put a lot of these lines on, but when you start, don't try and do them really close together. Do them about 3 centimeters apart, so that you come down like that. So you start off and you come round, you get your wrist at a nice angle, come all the way around, and you're going to start to go round. Get a nice curve in there. And what you're going to do in a minute is you're going to follow the process up again, and you're going to go round again, and you're just going to fill in that gap in between so that you fill them out. So you just have to remember where you started from, and this time go nice and carefully and fill in. And this one's always easier because you've got the other ones to use as a guide. Constantly turning the dough around. If you're working in a pastry shop and you're doing these, you know, the first couple that you do might not be exactly how you want them, but once you've had a bit of practice. There's a bit of an air bubble in there, so I'm just going to put a small gap in the hope that it pushes out slightly. Some of those are a bit wider. Okay, so that's it. That's the dish ready to go into the oven. What we do is, before we put it in, you chill it down so that you get the dough to relax again. So half an hour in the fridge, and then straight from the fridge into the oven. So deck, I would say about 210, 220, or convection, I would say around 200, but obviously you know your oven best. And it's going to take about 20 to 25 minutes for the initial cook. And then you're going to take it out, you're going to icing sugar the top, and then you're going to put it back in, temperature up by about 10-15 degrees. Give it another 5 minutes or so, might be 3 minutes, might be 6 minutes, and it's going to caramelize the top, and it's going to look really great and shiny. All right, so we've just allowed the Pithivier to rest in the fridge for a good hour just to make sure that all the dough has a chance to relax and it won't go out of shape in the oven. So we prepped the oven 190, and we're going to cook it for about 20 minutes, and then have a check after about 20 minutes. Make sure that it's cooking in the way we want it to, it's getting enough colour and it's rising. And then we'll turn the oven up by about 15 degrees, take the Pithivier out, glaze it with icing sugar, back in for 5 minutes, get really nice golden brown shiny colour. So the Pithivier, just have a quick look, put the lights on, you can see it's got a nice golden colour, nice glaze on top. So that's been about 23 minutes or so. So what we'll do now is, I'm just going to take it out. Just before it comes out, I'm going to turn the oven up about 10-15 degrees more. This oven is quite powerful, so 205 is plenty. I'm going to give it about another 3 or 4 minutes. Turn the fan up slightly, and I'm going to open the vent as well because I don't want to keep any more moisture in. And now I'm going to glaze the top with some icing sugar. Less is more with this again, so the more icing sugar you put on, the more the oven's got to melt. So if you can be as careful as possible to get a nice covering, then that's perfect. Fantastic. All right, and then this one is a definite one you've got to watch because it's high in temperature, so 205 degrees, lots of fan. So you want to really keep your eye on it. 3, 4, 5 minutes. The key thing here is to glaze the top much as possible, get it really nice and shiny, but not burn the whole product. So we're going to have a quick check on the Pithivier, have a look at the icing sugar glaze, and you can see that it's almost all the icing sugars caramelized and glazed on top of the Pithivier, so it's completely finished and ready to come out. So you can see that all the sugar is caramelized and you can see all those lines and you can see the laminations on the side, and it's completely finished.